recording?
I am recording.
Good. For the record, ladies and gentlemen of the internet, Jason Sims just called me and was not recording.
Well,
it's like this amateur hour.
No, I always do that to give people, it'd be like you go to a swimming pool and you dip your foot in first. You don't just jump in.
You have too much respect for people. ABR, Jason. Always be recording.
They got Nixon in trouble.
Yeah, but you're not Nixon. I'm Nixon in this situation. I'm the one who can say something, damage my reputation. That's why you got to be recording. Because unless someone specifically says this is off the record, it's all on the record.
Okay, you're going to turn me into a media wolf before this is over.
No, you
with.
don't want to. I know you want to be nice to everybody, Jason, but it's time for that to end.
That's the point at which I'm at in my tragic story.
No, I think it's fantastic. But I would say that since you are not breaking news, since you are simply talking to people whom you like and enjoy, I think it's a lovely courtesy to extend to ask for permission to record. But I would ask for it right away, because, ladies and gentlemen of the internet, the gold leaf that Jason Sims and I conversationally put down upon the State House dome of our conversation before we even started recording shall never be known. Shall never shine in the golden sunlight of Boston's Beacon Hill, the city upon a hill.
Well, John, I am a fan of the ephemeral, and I'm a fan of things that only a few people get to experience. So that's kind of another reason why I did that.
So were you catching all of my Boston State House references?
No, I did. I realized that now that you're talking about the Boston State House.
Yeah.
You're going to have to educate.
The Boston State House has a beautiful dome. It gleams golden in the sunlight because it is covered in gold leaf, which is very thin pieces of gold. Real gold, Jason said.
Oh, yeah.
Unless they scraped it all off and sent it to Cash for Gold during the recession.
You got to pay for that. What's the big dig?
Yeah, the big dig.
Yeah.
That tragically took a woman's life. That's
terrible.
And was considered to be the biggest public works boondoggle of the century. But do you know what? Now everyone loves it. They dug out all of central Boston and threw down an underground traffic artery, roadway, to replace the above-ground traffic artery, and it has improved traveling through Boston a lot. Two separate words, a lot. Now, I'm going to repeat to you the question that I asked when we were recording. Are you picking up the sound of the two high-speed oscillating fans?
I am picking up the sound of the two high-speed oscillating fans, and I'm fine with that because it adds to the placeness.
Right.
Of where you are.
It's hot where I am, and I'm not turning them off. I don't care what it does for your audio quality.
So I tell you what, since we've already started talking, usually I do this dumb host stuff at the beginning where I say all this spiel, but I'm just going to record.
No,
I'm just going to record that afterwards.
So I want to hear. I want to hear it.
I'll be quiet. So this is the most non-traditional episode yet.
Hang on, I'm going to turn off the fans.
No, I don't want you to.
No, I'm going to turn off the fans so you can get good audio on this. There's one.
Well, see, now you're going to make the audio after this sound worse.
You hear it slowing down?
I do hear it.
Hang on. Slowing up. Oh, I turned it to low. Sorry. There
that's poignant, the sound of a fan slowing down. Aren't we all slowing down in our own way? Okay.
Is this your spiel?
No, it's not. It's usually not existential. It's usually very boring and pedestrian. So here we go.
Okay. Well, I want to hear it because I want to know. I got to know what this is all about.
Okay.
So, I'm going to give you on my mark.
Okay.
3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Jason Sims Puts You in Your Place. It's a series of conversations with creative people about how the places in their lives affect them and their work, and also about their oscillating fans. I'm Jason Sims, and as I record this, I'm on the 4th and final day of my staycation, in which I did almost nothing and went almost nowhere, and it was glorious. You can find us online at slotsglobal.com. Look for us on the podcast tab, on the iTunes. I'm on Twitter at Jason_Sims. That's JASON_SIMS, and I spell it every time because it annoys my wife. My email for this podcast is emailjasonsims@gmail.com. We have a Facebook group no one cares about. Also, you may have noticed that the episodes before this one, a couple episodes before this one, were guest hosted. And that's the thing we're doing this summer. We have several folks lined up to put other folks in their place, and it's like crop rotation for your ears. But I will be dropping in every few episodes just like this to talk to special people like our guest, John Hodgman.
Well, special people.
Yeah,
right, go ahead. Go ahead.
And now we'll say hello to our guest, special person, an oscillating fan owner or renter, John Hodgman.
Very nice. Fans back on. Fan number 1, engage. Fan number 2, engage. Oscillating mechanism, engage. Now, if I talk like this, do I sound like a Cylon or what? Hello, Jason. This is John Hodgman. You know, it doesn't sound like a Cylon. It sounds like we're talking over Skype.
Yes, that's exactly what it sounds like.
Yeah, but no, landline only for you, sir.
Yes. So, I was going to say something. Now my brain went blank because you
where is my place? That's what you. I'm dropping all these hints.
You freaked me out with your Cylon talking. I was going to ask you. I was going to ask you if you had to divert power from your shields to power up your fans, but
look, I don't want to talk nerd talk with you. I'm trying to get deep.
Okay, we will. I'm going to lie.
I'm dropping all these hints about where I am, and you haven't even asked the first question, Jason.
I know. Look, my groove is completely thrown off, but I'm okay with that. I'm in this for getting my groove thrown off. So, John Hodgman, where are you right now?
First of all, Jason Sims, talk about special people. I'm talking to one right now.
Oh. Is there somebody else in the room? Oh, I thought there was someone else in the room.
No.
I thought you were doing American Sign Language to someone else in the room.
Look, you're on your staycation. I'm on my vacation.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not talking to anybody except for Jason Sims.
It's like we're hanging out on the deck.
It is like we are. So you're on staycation in Huntsville, Alabama. Is that correct?
Yes, I am.
I am not in Boston, where I was dropping all that State House trivia.
Yeah.
Though I am from Brookline, Massachusetts, and I normally would spend a chunk of the summer in the home that my family owns that had belonged to my mother in the Pioneer Valley of Western Massachusetts. Not really Western Massachusetts because people think that's the Berkshires, which is a pretty beautiful Tony resort area, but more the Midwestern Massachusetts, the Connecticut River Valley, and home to the 5 colleges of the 5-college area: Amherst, UMass Amherst, Smith, Holyoke, and Hampshire colleges. I'm not there either. I am in a different part of New England, my home region, the state of Maine, which was once part of Massachusetts, so I still feel pretty comfortable.
Some ownership.
Yeah. I lorded over them a little bit.
The Stephen King state.
I am in the Stephen King state. I am not far from Bangor, Maine.
Okay.
Which is, I know it's Stephen King's home airport. I don't know exactly where he lives.
Is there a sign? Stephen King's home airport?
No, I drove by. Like, he has a home though. Now, this is true. Years and years ago, he has a home near Bangor, and I drove by it once.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew it was his home because the wrought iron gate outside his home had black widow spiders. You wouldn't say carved into a wrought iron gate, wrought into it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, lest anyone doubt that that's Stephen King's house.
Yeah. He's not hiding it from anybody.
Right.
So, yep, Stephen King over here. He's a good guy, Stephen King. I like him so much.
I thought maybe he had a dome over his house.
I haven't had a chance to watch that yet.
I haven't either.
Jason Sims is referring to the television adaptation of Under the Dome by Stephen King, which is written in part and showrun by the great comic book writer Brian K. Vaughan, and writer in general, creator of Y: The Last Man, and the current comic book series Saga, which is great. If you haven't seen it, pick it up. And also on the writing staff and a writer on the show is my old friend from college, Yale University, Mr. Adam Stein, an incredible actor who's now become an incredible TV writer. So I feel terrible that I haven't watched that Under the Dome. I might get some Stephen King in me and dial that up on the low-speed internet that we have here in Maine, if it's possible. Right, that's got to be on iTunes, right?
I would imagine.
I bet you it is. I'm going to watch it tonight. Thank you for making me think of that. I'm not going to let you ask the question because I have another thing that I got to say about that.
Absolutely.
Under the Dome is not a book that I have read, but I have an incredible fondness for it anyway, because when I was on a book tour, that book was coming out, and I remember sitting on an airplane flying to one bookstore or another and seeing a dude reading the newspaper on the aisle across from me, and there was a huge full-page advertisement for Under the Dome by Stephen King. And the advertising copy that the publisher saw fit to put on this full-page New York Times advertisement for Under the Dome was "Read Under the Dome" by Stephen King. It's his longest novel since The Stand.
Oh, my goodness. The Stand, you can use that if you need to reach something on a shelf. You can stand on that. That's why they call it The Stand.
I know, but I just love that the publisher thought, and was probably correct, that Stephen King fans will be like, his longest, you say? Well, then sign me up.
Right. He's like
you're buying those books for volume as much as anything else, and there's good reason, because you read Stephen King, and it's just it's like eating a box of chocolate.
Yes, you fly through it.
I don't want to say box of chocolate. That's a Forrest Gump thing.
And you get diabetes afterwards.
Yeah, no, it's like every page is great. You want to just keep reading. You don't want to stop reading. You want to keep reading. You want it to be long.
Right.
2 years ago, in this very room that I speak to you, in place to be unnamed, Maine.
Yes.
Because I don't want people following me around.
You don't have any kind of spot, any kind of arachnids on your gate to identify your place.
No, exactly.
There's a law.
We're renting. This is a house that we've rented in Maine for the past couple of years because my wife, Catherine, grew up coming to Maine and likes Maine a lot. Mm-hmm. And her father and stepmother and 2 uncles live here. So we started coming up here to visit a little bit each summer, and now it's become a very happy, epic visit. So we rented this house, and naturally I put up my wrought iron gates with the wrought iron glasses and mustache on it. So
because every famous person in Maine, if you're a famous person, you have to put up an identifying wrought iron gate.
Yeah, it's part of the rules.
It's like Game of Thrones. Everybody has their own gate.
It's the sigil of our sigil of our house.
Sigil.
Although, you know what, in true Maine fashion, it wouldn't be a wrought iron fence. It would be a weather vane.
Ah.
Oh, Jason Sims, hang on. I had to remember a couple of things. First, The Stand. Second, Ari. Remember these things. The Stand, Ari. All right, now weather vanes. Yesterday, look, the base. We're in Blue Hill, Maine. No one cares. We'll be gone by the time you weirdos show up.
Yeah, right.
It's a lovely town by the water in Midcoast, Maine. And we drove up to Acadia National Park to walk around a body of water. And Acadia is a beautiful national park, but the gateway to Acadia is this strangled chicken neck of road, just packed with lobster houses, mini golf, and weirdly, cupola and weather vane smiths. It is touristy. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And the road is purposefully narrow, and by strangled chicken neck, I mean it is long and narrow, and it is a chokehold for your cars before you can get to the natural beauty of Acadia, the bulk of which is on an island, beautiful Mount Desert Isle in Maine. You have to travel this 2-lane highway, and you have to pass by all of these pizza places and lobster shacks and mini golf and lumberjack shows. And I mean, it's a kind of bit of Americana that you don't see a tremendous amount of anymore. And so there's something charming. But we counted 3 or 4, well, more likely 3 different places advertising custom-made cupolas and weather vanes.
Huh.
And I really found it to be a surprising number of custom-made cupola. A cupola is that thing that sits on top of a barn. Do you know what I mean? Like it's like a little box, an aerated box.
I think
on top of that you put a weather vane.
It looks like a little roof on it, maybe?
Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
We call those dog houses here, I think.
Oh yeah, but you put them on the ground and put a dog in them.
Well, we're referring to the things on the ground. We use dog boxes to keep our dogs in.
Okay, I got you.
Yeah.
Great.
Well, no, they're boxes, but it's.
Well, here in the north,
I don't want to go into it.
We're in the south of the north. You understand?
Yes, I understand.
Maine is referred to as down east because the Canadians. That's a Canadian descriptor because we are southeast of Canada.
Mm-hmm.
You understand what I'm saying?
Oh yeah.
And it is a rural place, and it is a conservative place inland, and it is a conservative place on the. Essentially, it is a rural conservative state, except for the coast, where it is a assholic financial conservative state, like preppy conservative state.
Uh-huh.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
With various pockets of liberalism around the way. But anyway, there seemed to be an abundance of cupola and weather vane, custom weather vane making. And it was because, I gather, because people like to put custom weather vanes on top of the cupolas, on top of the barns at their summer homes. But why there would be three on the single road that caters to tourists who are going to a national park? Like, is this something you're going to take home to your house in Lansing, Michigan?
Yeah.
It was like it's like Yale University, where there's far more a cappella singing groups than are required by a population of any size, much less the size of New Haven, Connecticut.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say that probably we would need to, the sigil of the home would be a giant, I wonder if Stephen King has a giant black widow spider weather vane on top of his cupola. You know what I mean?
Yeah, if he has a cupola.
Right.
Which he may be required, and by law, he may be required to.
That's true. I read The Stand 2 summers ago in the very room that I am speaking to you now, and I wish I could just read it again.
That's the only Stephen King novel, well, I think, that I've ever gotten through, is The Stand. I've read a lot of his short stories, but The Stand is the only novel I've ever gotten through because it just really, really moves.
Do you mean you found others? You got bogged down in others of the Stephen King?
Well, I'll take that back. I read Cell. I read that zombie book because it was really short, but...
Yeah, I've not read a ton of Stephen King, and I've not read a ton of the recent works. Yeah. I'm ashamed to admit here in public. I wish I had not allowed you to record that.
Well, that's the kind of thing that I try and protect you from by leaving the recorder off. So you could have said that earlier when the recorder was off, and you'd been safe.
No, it's all right. You know what? I own all of my words. And Stephen King knows how I feel.
By law, you own them.
Stephen King knows how I feel about things because in my last book, and by last I mean most recent and maybe my last, I wrote this book called That Is All. It was my last book. And because I was reading The Stand here while writing it, or while editing it, I should say, I added this whole sequence where I'm telling the story of the day-by-day story of the end of the world, and which is what The Stand is about as well. It's
yes.
a total societal collapse after a super flu. And in my version, society collapses because of an electromagnetic pulse, and also the blood wave, and also the dog storm.
Yes.
But Stephen King doesn't know this is happening because he's in remote Maine, and so he's up here happily writing away, and he's written an extra 700 pages to The Stand that he needs to, because as readers of The Stand know, Stephen King published The Stand, which is, as I say, about a super flu, and it came out in a 700-page edition in 1978 or something, and they made him cut 300 pages for space.
Which is a whole book.
Yeah. And then when Stephen King got his money right in the late 80s, early 90s, he made his publisher re-release The Stand unexpurgated with the extra 300 pages in it. Like, no one wanted that 300 pages. Stephen King was already a multi-million selling bestseller. Like, everyone loved The Stand.
Mm-hmm.
But Stephen King said, no, they must have the full thing. And sure enough, the 1,000-page edition sold again like hotted cakes. And then, so in my universe, I had Stephen King sit down one morning and write another 700 pages of The Stand and decided that America needed to read that as well. But of course, society had collapsed at that point and there were no publishers anymore. So Stephen King bundled up his manuscript and put it in a shopping cart and took to the road to go from door to door to read the 700 pages of The Stand to everyone he could find who was still alive, often terrorizing families in their homes and survival shelters. So that's in print, and Stephen King knows about this because I wanted him to read those portions of the book for the audiobook.
Oh, wow.
And whether he really took in just how much I was affectionately lampooning his completism, I don't know. But he wrote me a really nice email saying, no way. And I love Stephen. I love him so much. He's such a great writer. He really is a great writer. And I love being near his wrought iron gates.
Did he have a little ASCII spider by part of his signature?
No, what are you talking about? An ASCII spider?
Yeah, a little ASCII spider.
The sigil of his house?
Yeah.
I haven't read the works of Joe Hill, his son, the Jaime Lannister to Stephen King's Tywin Lannister.
I haven't either.
Or Tabitha King. Well, got them all over the place.
Well, welcome back.
I bought a copy of Night Shift. Oh, you got to do a break?
Well, I was just going to welcome everybody back to Stephen King Talk. This is Stephen King.
Yeah.
This is a podcast where we go in depth into the works of Stephen King. So just let everybody know that before we get back into talking.
2 summers ago, I read The Stand Up Here. The summer before that, or maybe it was the same summer. Maybe I finished The Stand Up Here and then read Salem's Lot, which is set entirely in Maine. And if you've ever read Night Shift, which is a collection of short stories by Stephen King, which is kind of essential, then there's Jerusalem's Lot, which is sort of a precursor to Salem's Lot in that book, and Night Surf, which is set. It was written before The Stand, but it also deals with the superflu that wipes out civilization, but in a much more obviously condensed, insofar as it's 30 pages long as opposed to 1,000 pages long. And terrifying, in a way, a much more intimate and terrifying way. It's one of the most affecting and terrifying stories, only because of what it reveals of the human condition.
Right, and it's much more bleak. There's much less hope.
Incredibly bleak.
Yeah.
And you know, as fine a literary short story as has been written by anyone. It's a beautiful short story. Night Surf, check it out, everybody. In the book Night Shift by Stephen King, which is a great book because it collects its early work by Stephen King, and it reminds, like, you go through where everything was published, and it's like Playboy and Argosy and all these sort of men's magazines that had literary pretensions at the same time, and Esquire, and you know, all these magazines used to publish this kind of great genre fiction that were very mainstream at the time, but don't really exist anymore. So there you go.
Except on the internet.
Next question.
Okay, so let's talk. I want to know before we talk about where you were spawned, where you began to manifest on this plane of existence back in Massachusetts. Give me just a little bit more about rural Maine. Some things that might be surprising, because the weather vane thing, that was surprising. I would never have guessed. Because
I've known my wife for so long. I mean, we've known each other since we were 7. She was 17 and I was 16.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've been to Maine a lot, and it was never my place per se, but hers.
Mm-hmm.
So I would come to Vacation Land USA. That's what they call Maine, as a tourist, sort of in every sense of the word. Literally, as someone who didn't live here, and also sort of as an emotional tourist who was just sort of seeing the place through the affection and nostalgia that she had for this place, where she grew up going every summer for years and years and years and years. And only recently have I come to feel a little bit more at home here myself.
Mm-hmm.
And it's I don't know what to say. I'm trying to think of what, you know, Maine was considered vacation land, you know, because humans had not, when it was dubbed vacation land 100 years ago, humans had not discovered actual beaches yet.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they certainly had not discovered air conditioning. And at that time, Maine was significantly cooler than any part of southern New England and certainly the mid-Atlantic states. and was significantly cooler than it is now. It's much hotter here now, as you can tell by my oscillating fan club.
50 years ago, you would have only had one. You would only had one oscillating fan, and now you have to have two.
Well, my initial experience with Maine, actually, before I ever met my wife, was I grew up in Brookline, which is just surrounded on three sides, just nestled into the armpit of Boston.
Yeah.
And my dad and mom on 2 different summers, took a week's vacation in Maine, where we stayed at a hotel in Kennebunkport, Maine, because all the towns in Maine and New England stole all these Native American names that are hard to, like Shawmut. That's the original name of Boston, but Kennebunkport, and all along the Cape you have names like Quantittlemuxut, and just crazy names.
Yeah.
And Kennebunkport is it's in the southern coast of Maine, so within driving distance of Boston, and therefore very, very resorty and very preppy. And this is where the George W. Bush clan has their compound.
Yes.
And this was before he was even vice president. I was there as a youth.
What's on
maybe just when he was vice president.
What's on their weather vane?
What's on their weather vane?
Yeah. What's their
Oh, you're making me dig deep for some George Bush jokes. Nothing I can think
of. It's lips. Is it just his lips that you have to read them? It's just his lips.
Pretty good.
And they say no new taxes.
I was gonna say some vomited broccoli. What's the George H.W. Bush?
He was head of the CIA. There's that. He was a pilot in World War II.
Yeah, wrought iron CIA. Those glasses, those big glasses that he wore. Yeah.
Yeah. 1,000 points a lot. That's what's on it.
Yeah. Okay.
1,000
fair
points
enough.
A lot.
Fair enough.
There we go. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to derail your.
It's a wrought iron dedication, actually. This weather vane is dedicated to my son, the future president of the United States, Jeb Bush. He had it made up in 1991 when he was still president. Looking forward to what seems to be the inevitable future. Yeah. We were all surprised.
Man, that's some
never took the weather vane down. Poppy never took that weather vane down. Another reason why George W. Bush hates his father.
Right, and that's some Game of Thrones action right there.
It is. Oh boy, talk about that, right? George W. Bush basically is, Tyrion Lannister, right? The stunted half-man who accidentally became king, or handed the king, and then Jeb Bush was the great warrior who got his hand cut off through his own weakness and stupidity.
Did you know I couldn't carry on past the first one of those? Because I remember posting on Twitter.
Maybe you just don't like good books. Maybe that's the problem.
Well, because it's just people are just being like people who I don't know. Like I couldn't handle the it's like an abattoir in there. It's like I don't know.
It can get pretty grim in those Game of Thrones books. Yeah.
I like my grimness. The Night Beach or whatever. I like my grimness in shots.
Night Surf.
Yeah, Night Surf. I'm sorry. I like a shot glass of grimness.
A nice shot of grim.
And that's like a whole liquor cabinet.
This from the guy who practices a month's worth of sadness in anticipation of Christmas.
Well, that's a 12th of the year. It's not it's not every month. So I mean So at any rate, Maine. We were in Maine.
I also read those Games of Thrones books up here too. Now that I think about it, this is one of those times when I can really lie out and read books that are long. I can read the longest since Stephen King's The Stand.
Mm-hmm.
That's basically what it comes down to: long, uninterrupted periods of just reading stuff.
Which is nice.
It's one of the things I like about it.
Yeah, it's very nice to have that, especially if you're a busy person.
Well, and you're forced to read, in part because, here they have televisions, but when I was but a child, and I went to this hotel with my mom and dad called the Colony Hotel,
mm-hmm.
which is it's a big old Stephen King-like shining style, all-in-one resort hotel, the kind that they, had in the early part of the last century.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of going on a cruise or whatever, you and your family would decamp. You and your aristocratic family would decamp to an overlook-style hotel in the mountains of Colorado, for example, or in the coast of Maine, because you were chasing the weather, basically, right? Because there was no air conditioning. So you would go to a place where it was cooler to just be, and you would decamp to these huge hotels for the entire summer. Because if you were an aristocratic family, what else were you going to do?
Right.
So you would golf, and you would sail, and you would go back to your hotel, and you would sit at the same table every night, and you would wear a jacket and tie and eat your prepared lobster with your same waiter or waitress every night. And while it is not the case there anymore, in 1980 or so, when I was but a child, 1980-81, when we spent those 2 summers there, the colony was still like that. You still had to dress for dinner.
Wow.
And you still had an assigned table where you would eat every night, like on a cruise ship. If it was a 4-top, you might be there with your family, but if it was a larger table, you'd be there with strangers. And you would sit at the same place every night. And there was also no air conditioning, because why would you need air conditioning? This is Maine.
Right.
Well, at that point, global warming had already started, so you did need it. And there were no televisions in the rooms. There was one room off the lobby where there was a television where you could go down and get Those Amazing Animals or That's Incredible fix, as I did. But otherwise, you were left to wander the haunted hallways by yourself as a child, waiting to see 2 girls in dresses asking you to play with them. It was an amazing experience, an amazing sort of remnant of what Maine really was for so long, which was, basically rural subsistence farming and fishing and lobstering, with an occasional massive influx of summer money from essentially moneyed families from New England, and nowhere else, really. And that's changed somewhat.
It's interesting when you get to see the end of a thing like that, like when you come along on the tail end of a thing and you're watching it wind down like an oscillating fan that's been cut off.
Yeah, bringing it back, oscillating right back to where we started. Jason Sims, master broadcaster. It is. It was very, even as a youth, I was amazed by it.
Mm-hmm.
And now the colony at that time had a minimum stay of a week. You couldn't stay for less than a week. Now it's just a regular hotel. You don't have to dress for dinner. They offer a lot of the same amenities, and there's still no TVs in the rooms. We went back a couple summers ago on our drive back from Maine to western Massachusetts and then to New York, and just stayed a night or 2 there. They have a heated outdoor saltwater pool. Pretty cool place. But Kennebunkport is pretty preppy. Pretty preppy. And I had my wife bringing me up to Maine, early in our marriage, and we've been married 13 years. We'll be married 14 years this September. And then we knew each other for a long time before, as I said, we knew each other's kids.
Right.
But, initially my trips to Maine were highly traumatic, because I grew up in an affluent suburb called Brookline.
This is a good segue, by the way.
Yeah, no, I know what I'm doing. I'm also a master broadcaster.
Isn't that, it's also good to point out when people are making segues, that's master broadcasting, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, just show how constructive the entire experience is. But I grew up in an affluent suburb called Brookline, but Brookline was also at the tail end of something, too. In that late 70s into the early 80s, we all were at the tail end of something. Like Maine was at the tail end of its aristocratic summering period, And America was at the tail end of its middle class period. Do you know what I mean? Like, where, you know, my mom and dad made pretty good money. My dad was a business executive, and my mom was a registered nurse. But they could afford to take a week to go up to the colony in Kennebunkport. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they could, and also it was the end of the 70s, so, you know, Brookline itself was much more diverse. Now, I think you couldn't buy a home there for less than $1.5 million, but it was a place. Yeah, fancy pants, and there was a lot of fancy pants money in Brookline. A lot of old money, a lot of new money, a lot of, you know, scions of department store fortunes living around the corner.
You know, I think
it was a very leafy, pretty suburb. But at the same time, my mom and dad, who were the first two in their family to have gone to college, you know, both of my dad's dad worked in the paper mill. My mom's dad worked in the Philadelphia Inquirer printing press. Neither of their moms worked. Do you know what I mean? And yet they were able to raise large families in Philadelphia and central Massachusetts and send their kids to college, and their kids, like, this was the American dream, right?
Yes.
And their kids could get respectable professional jobs and then go to Brookline and buy a ginormous house off of a failed commune in a suburb that now would be home only to millionaires. So that's sort of the weird transition that we were going through. And when I was growing up, there were kids in Brookline who did not have a ton of money and also living in beautiful old homes, because there were these beautiful old homes just sort of around, and they were expensive to maintain. A lot of them were selling for not too much money, and you know, some of them were being sold to these weird hippie communes that then failed because the sex parties got out of hand due to jealousy and head games, and then sold to a mom and dad and their only son, who would remain an only child for the rest of his life. And we lived in a house with 16 rooms, the three of us together.
Wow.
And it was insane. It was insane. And they bought it for, well, I know that they sold it. They sold it in 1986 for something like $600,000. 16 rooms, $600,000.
Wow.
And that was a lot of money to us at that time.
Yeah.
And I think it was a good sale. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That house now surely would go for $3 million, I would guess, based on what's been done to it since we left. But, you know, I basically grew up in the Overlook Hotel. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
I was we had rooms. First of all, just so that you understand, we had boarders. You know, like, we took in kids from Boston College to live in the various attic suites of rooms that were unused.
The Greg Brady suite.
Yeah. You know, at one time we had 3 other people living with us. There was a whole suite of rooms that were unused that we rented out to boarders, and a whole 3rd floor with 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms on it that we just rented out to boarders. And so we really constricted ourselves only to 10 or so rooms for the 3 of us, many of them huge, 2 back staircases, and, you know, rooms that we didn't know what to do with. Rooms that were unfurnished, because it's like, what are we going to do with this one now? Jeez. One room became my room to practice the clarinet in. It was dumb. We all knew too. It was crazy. I think that because, you know, after 10 years, we're like, we got to get out of this. Is crazy. Let's get a house that is a normal size.
So 2 things that I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, well, but it was, you know, this was a house that, you know, as a child I could wander through and get creeped out in a dozen different ways and places. Yeah.
So these were when the visions of the end of the world and dog storms and blood waves started to brew in the head of a young John Hodgman.
I suppose that's true. We had a pretty creepy basement, that's for sure.
So the two things that occur to me, one of them is that picturing a young John Hodgman running around that place, because that kind of reminds me when I was a kid. I ran around.
Wait a minute, I didn't run around anywhere.
Oh, I'm sorry. You wandered. You wandered.
I strolled.
You strolled.
Yeah.
You don't run around in that neighborhood. You stroll.
Yeah. I strolled through the house.
But I used to run and climb and crawl and walk leisurely through the woods where I grew up, and that's where I had a lot of my creepy moments and moments of imagination. And if I'd had a clarinet, that's probably where I would have practiced my clarinet out in the woods. So that's kind of
What instrument did you play? Did you play a musical instrument as you were growing up?
I wanted to play the trombone, but my parents did not want to buy a trombone, and I think we had a snare drum. So I played the snare drum for about a month, and then I dropped out of the band because I did not like playing the snare drum. What's
not to like about playing the snare drum?
You know, I don't know.
It goes rat-a-tat-tat, dude.
It does, but I wanted something. I wanted a brass instrument if I was going to be in a band. Like, that's iconic, you know, I guess. And I just and also I quit.
76 trombones.
I wanted to be like this, you know, one of them. I'll be the 75th. I'll be the 74th. I don't have to be the first. But I think also I tend to quit things because I'm a quitter.
Oh no, I'm sorry to hear that. Don't say that.
Well, I'm just getting better. I've done about 30 something of these, so that's something.
What else have you quit?
Oh goodness, all kinds of things.
Did you quit high school?
I did not. I
quit college?
College quit me, actually.
They kicked you out?
They stopped giving me money to go, so...
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's sort of the story of my life.
What else did you quit? You're not going to quit your family, obviously.
No.
You love them very much.
Heavens, no. I'm bound to them. What else have I quit? I've quit. I mean, I've started... Go ahead. No, I've started all kinds of creative endeavors and just dropped them.
Yeah, well, that's life.
Yeah, so that's probably...
Look, I quit the clarinet because, you know, I was a weird kid. You know, I played the clarinet and the viola. I'm like, what are the two most unpractical and obscure instruments I can choose? Clarinet's not that obscure, but I could have played, like, what instruments could I play that would avoid me being perceived as cool?
Yeah, and getting in a band. Now, nowadays, if you'd been twins and you'd been alive right now, like we're in Brooklyn, you could totally have a band that is a clarinet and a viola.
If I had an identical twin and one of us played the viola and one of us played the clarinet, well, they're in the same register, that's for sure.
Yeah. So you would.
No kidding.
You would.
But in the '80s, if I played the saxophone, I could have been playing hot sax solos on almost any pop song of the day.
Yeah.
I refuse to let my kids take up an instrument that they cannot play at a party. I want my children to have friends.
No glockenspiel, no calliope.
Well, you know what? Then they could play a glockenspiel at a hipster party in Williamsburg.
Something tells me that the window for that stuff's going to be pretty narrow, kind of like the saxophone. You had like the 50s, and you had the 80s, and that was kind of... Blah, 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 blah. Blah, 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 blah. That could have been me. Blah, 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 blah. Oscillating fan blowing your hair as you play. So the other thing that occurs to me is you in this house with these weird, presumably weird college kids in it. What did that do to you? Well,
it cultivated in me a love of beaded curtains, which is yet to subside. They were graduate students. Like there was an Indian guy named Vashkar from the country of India, who was doing some graduate work, maybe not at BC, but somewhere in medicine. And he rented that suite of rooms for a while. And so let me draw you a little picture. You go up the stairs to the second floor, and there's a long hallway to the left, and then there's a door on the right. And through that door is the suite of rooms, the second floor suite of rooms, which was two large rooms, then a connecting walk-through closet to a third room, and then a bathroom with a shower. And that's what we would rent out. walk-through connecting closets. This is the kind of place that I grew up in. Crazy.
I had one of those in the house I grew up in.
Yeah. Oh, geez, the houses of the 70s. Oh. Okay, so, suite of rooms. Vashkar lived in this suite of rooms, and he had a bead curtain. Now, I don't know why he had a bead curtain, whether he was a hippie or whether it had something to do with him being from India. Mm-hmm. He was a medical student. And I would go, and I loved that bead curtain when I was a kid. And my parents found me at least once sitting on his couch watching television, eating saffron ice cream that he had given me. So it was like I was a worldly kid.
Oh, yeah.
And then years later, I got a bead curtain out of the back of a Rolling Stone magazine or whatever for my room in that house. It was a garbage bead curtain, I got to tell you. It was plastic. It fell apart. Mm. And then years later still, when we moved into our apartment in Brooklyn, the kids have a bathroom where we also consigned, where there's also a washer-dryer. Mm-hmm. This is nice. And that's also where we consigned the litter box for our dumb cat. And I'm like, oh, it's gross that the kids have to look at this litter box. And I'm like, you know what I could do? I could put a bead curtain here. And after a couple of years, I did. And it was a beautiful bead curtain. Everyone in my family hates this bead curtain to me.
Isn't it nice to have things like that?
Yeah.
In your life, that you're the only one. It makes it, I don't know what it is about this. There's an intimacy to that, with that thing. That I'm the only one that loves you thing. Yeah, everyone else hates you.
I love you, bead curtain. So I was, and Brookline in Boston is a cosmopolitan place. Mm-hmm. With a lot of schools and universities in it, so all these people would be coming through all the time. And then there was another guy named Bill who lived in that suite of rooms, who had an amazing exotic fish tank with some goldfish, with some very, those large goldfish, not koi, but larger goldfish that had those bulbous eyes that looked like something terrible has happened to them. That left an impression. And then there was Debbie, who lived there. Debbie lived there for a while, and I remember very distinctly running, it was all childhood memories, but running into Debbie with my mom at the Star Market. And she was eating like a granola bar that she had not yet purchased. And I just remember my mind exploding. I was like, what are you doing? Why are you eating food in the supermarket? Well, this is food I'm going to buy. You haven't bought it yet? No, I'm going to buy it when I get up there. I was like, wow, you know what? Boston really is a worldly place. I'm learning from some sophisticated tricks from some world-class people. And then, after a while, Debbie left, and my mom and dad, and I was going into high school. And my mom and dad said, oh, I think we should get another boarder in there. And I'm like, Mom and Dad, I'm sorry, but no, it's my time. I'm taking the suite of rooms. And I did.
Wow.
This is what an only child I was. I took that suite of rooms for myself. It was my time to be a grown-up. I didn't get my bead curtain was shot at that point. Yeah. And I didn't get another one. Maybe I tried to put it up. I can't remember. You know what? Maybe I did try to put it up again in there. Let's just say for the sake of the story, I did. And I took over Vashkar's bedroom, and I set it up with my stereo in there, my desk in there. And then I took over Vashkar's and Debbie and Bill's living room, and I took my old. This is what I did. I had a bunk bed, one of those only children bunk beds.
I had one of those. I had one of those too, and they're very sad.
Were you an only child?
Basically, I have a half sister who didn't live with us very often. So yeah,
gotcha.
Basically.
Yeah. So you know what I'm talking about.
Oh, I know exactly what you're saying. It's a shelf. It becomes a shelf.
Exactly. It's a shelf. It's a place for sleepovers. It's a place to announce to the world, I'm an only child. I get 2 beds. Thank you very much. So I took that bunk bed, and I threw that into Vashkar's living room, and I took it apart. I took the top off and put it down and created an L-shaped sectional sofa out of it. Some bolsters up in there. It was hot. Put it in a side table and a fern. Wow. I grabbed my parents' old black and white TV from their first apartment from up in the attic. Brought that down, put that up on a crate. Tuned that in very carefully to Dick Clark and Ed McMahon doing bloopers, goof-ups, and gags or whatever. Would watch that of an evening with the windows open, listening to the few cars pass. I grabbed a twin bed from one of the many guest rooms and threw that into the bedroom. So then at the end of bloopers, goof-ups, and chuckles or whatever, I'd turn that off and go, well, I think I'll turn in. And go into bed. Then you take a shower in my own personal shower.
Wow.
Oh, it was sweet.
What?
Maybe pop a Eurythmics tape into the boombox in my bathroom.
That's what sweet dreams are made of.
As I showered. Drink a herbal tea or whatever. I had an old desk set up. I had my desk and my Macintosh 128K computer set up in my bedroom. That's where I did my real work. My homework. But when I was feeling creative, I moved into my living room. You understand how old I was?
Yeah.
What a weirdo I was. I can't believe I'm remembering this for the first time.
Had I been able to do this, I would have been doing all of this stuff, except maybe for the big curtain, because I'd never encountered one, but I would have been doing all the same stuff. I mean, I
was a spoiled kid. I won't say spoiled. My parents didn't spoil me, but I was lucky. I had an abundance of space and resources and parental patience.
Yeah.
And so I took this old antique school desk that had come into our possession. Maybe that came out of the basement. There was a lot of abandoned stuff in the basement of this house. There was an old scratched-up pool table in there, an old Skittles table. I don't know if you know what Skittles is. Look it up.
Yeah, I'll have to look it up.
And so I hauled that up to my living room, and I put a manual typewriter on there so I could do my creative work.
Wow.
Did I tell you that I had a fern? I had a fern.
Yes, you did.
That was the thing that marked it as the 80s, because that was the early 80s, because that was a sign of sophistication.
Yes.
And this could happen. Two working class Catholic people from Philadelphia and central Massachusetts could go to college and raise enough money to give all their money over to this commune. So I said the house sold for maybe $600,000. I think they bought it for under $200,000.
Wow.
Which again was all their money. But imagine, Chase.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Imagine. And so Brookline was a place where the American dream could come true, and two hard-working, but ambitious people from the working class suburbs of Philadelphia and central Massachusetts, or, urban suburbs, I should say, the working class neighborhoods of Philadelphia and central Massachusetts, could go to college and buy a big house in the more affluent suburb of Brookline, and then their child could then fritter away his time typing out poems on a manual typewriter and practicing the viola while their fortunes burned, basically.
That's the American dream. That was
the American dream. But I went to school. This is to bring it back again, to oscillate back to Maine.
Yes.
So, I went to, we were in Brookline had some, at the time, still had some working class, and maybe still some working class Irish neighborhoods in it. But we lived in the one of the fancier parts of Brookline. And I went to the Heath School, and there was a mix of sort of middle class kids and sort of wealthier, preppier kids. There were a lot of popped collars. There was a lot of Izod. Mm-hmm. There was a lot of those rope bracelets.
Swatch watches.
A lot of people. Yeah, there were swatches, but I'm talking like swatches we all had. Do you know what I mean?
Well, I didn't.
Well, I know. I'm talking to. All right, I got you. I got it, Huntsville. Sorry.
Go ahead with your fancy swatch watch and pool table and Skittles table. Go ahead.
Well, no, but these things were abandoned in the basement.
I understand. I know. I understand.
You don't understand what I'm saying.
I know what you're saying.
Look, I understand my life was not quite as hard scrabble as yours.
And mine was not either. But it's
But I felt a certain amount of class anxiety at school, because there were kids there were kids who, wore those rope sailing bracelets and they Sperry topsiders to school, and they had these ski tans in the winter, and they had these sun tans in the summer, and they were going to Block Island, Martha's Vineyard, Nantucket, and various fancy parts of the Cape Cod during the summer, and I was driving down with my parents down to the Jersey Shore, to hang with my mom's family, which was, walking the boardwalk and eating fried dough. They were going and taking sailing lessons in Nantucket and to some degree in Maine. They were really preppy summer type experience. And so going to Maine, which is, which had a lot of that aristocratic New England money around and that sailing tradition around, all of which was extremely alien to me because I spent my time typing out bogus poems on an Olivetti and watching Doctor Who. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
I felt really, really out of place here, and to some degree I still do. I mean, we conned our children into taking sailing lessons at this yacht club near this house that we're renting, and I'm like, I don't know about this, and my wife said, it'll be fine. It's a new, it's not going to be as cruddy as it was when I was there, when there was a bunch of privileged jerks. Well, she's right. It's a lot more diverse, and the kids come from all over, and not many of them had a lot of sailing expertise, but there were a number of 8-year-olds there who, their moms would say, come on now, Spencer, you've got to leave sailing because it's time for your golf lesson. 8 years old.
Being groomed to be one of America's elite.
Yeah, so it's still, so I still feel a little out of place here, and that's, and that's when I dig in. That's when I dig into the Stephen King. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Because Stephen King is of Maine in a way that the summer people. He's not a summer person.
He came up from the soil of Maine. He's
right.
Grown,
Maine is
grown there.
Maine is an incredibly poor state. There's a lot of wealth on the coast, but it's we had some visitors up here who were like, are there any sort of like colonial Williamsburg or, Sturbridge Village recreations of old-timey Maine? I'm like, no, I don't think so. And now that I think of it, there don't have to be.
Right, because it's still there.
It's still, it's still basically dudes going out on boats.
Yeah.
And dragging prehistoric creatures off the bottom of the sea, and selling them that morning at the end of the dock that gets sold into the clam shacks all around Maine, and I'm talking about lobsters. That's what I mean by the prehistoric creatures.
Yes.
It's still a pre-industrial.
That wasn't a Pacific Rim. You weren't making a Pacific Rim reference.
No.
So go ahead. I'm sorry.
So that's all. So there you have New England. I've told you all about New England.
That's all you need to know. I'll never have to come there now.
Working, and it's like any other part. It's like coastal sophistication, coastal cosmopolitanness, and interior rural sort of poverty and inwardness. And that's true about Massachusetts. That's true about Maine. That's true about Argentina. That's true about North Carolina, South Carolina, any place at the coastline.
Those are my
port
people.
Port cities attract the world, and non-port cities hate the world.
Right. The people in the woods scare the world away from them. That's why they're in the woods, because they left.
Yeah, and they're scaring the world away for a reason. They don't want anything to do with it.
Well, they left it. That's where they came from before they went into the woods.
Right. Exactly so.
So here's the thing that as we wrap this up, because we're running out of time.
We got to do another one.
Well, I would love to do another one.
I enjoy talking to Jason Sims.
Oh, I enjoy having you talk to me.
All right. Let's wrap it up then.
Well, here's the thing. You and I, like you mentioned that your forefathers, were working in paper mills and print shops, and my grandfather, he worked on the railroad, and then before that, other people on my mom's side of the family, they were picking fruit, and they were, farmers and everything. And do you think there's some sort of providence? Because you and I, knowing what I know about me and knowing what I know about you, if we had to live that life, we would have died, right? We would have been dead. We wouldn't have the Constitution.
Well, I've had asthma my entire life,
and I have it, but I got it later in life. But it's
what are you taking for it? Advair?
I was taking the stuff in a red. It's a red inhaler.
Qvar?
Maybe it's not the purple round thing. It's the red.
That's Qvar.
And it's not a rescue inhaler. It was this daily.
Proventil.
Yes, probably.
Yeah,
that sounds right.
Yeah.
But it's manageable right now. So I've just got my red, albuterol rescue inhaler, which they changed. I used to be able to get those for $15, generic, but they changed the propellant in them, and now it's not generic anymore. So now you got to pay out the nose for it.
We are really getting into the weeds in our asthma talk. Hey, it's asthma talk.
Welcome to asthma talk. Yeah. So anyway,
but I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yes.
They changed the propellant to make it more ecologically compliant.
Which I am fine with that. I like the planet.
Sure.
I like the planet.
Let me tell you, sitting around Maine in 90-degree heat, which never happened before this year.
Yeah.
Being able to go into the water, which never happened before 5 years ago, because Maine beaches are designed to inflict pain upon humans. Jagged, sharp stone beaches with terribly cold water,
Yeah.
Like, I wish they had changed those Ventolin inhalers over a long time ago. Maybe we wouldn't have this problem anymore.
Right. Well,
all right, but you were talking about the kinship of Jason and John across generations and geography.
And there's probably a lot of people that way. I mean, is it just providential that by the time the genetic lottery came up with us, that we are able to we live in a world that lets us live, or did the world make us this way? I mean, if we had grown up in the 19th century, would we have been like hard drinking stevedores?
Oh, well, there's no question that the world made me you heard about my upbringing.
Yes.
So my natural inclinations to how do I put this? Inward nerdery towards the kind of weird fetishization of adulthood that I had when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
My love of books and comics and Tintin and Doctor Who, that was nurtured. That may have been a nature that I had, but it was without doubt nurtured by my surroundings, by my exposure to these things in Boston, which is sort of public television town USA. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. WHGB? WHGB?
WGBH.
GBH?
Nice try.
Sorry.
Try. That was good. I mean, it was a pretty deep pull for someone from Huntsville. By my parents who themselves had those interests and had, I wouldn't say broke away from their families, but created an emotional and cognitive gulf between themselves and their families by going to college. Their families definitely respected their decision to go to college and supported it and were proud of it. Mm-hmm. But at college, of course, they became people with different outlooks upon life, and they both. Well, my dad drifted away from the Catholic Church. My mom left.
Mm-hmm.
And it has to be because they went to college, even a Catholic college. Do you know what I mean? Like,
oh yeah,
they were exposed to a world in which that was an option. And they developed liberal points of view that while both of my families were dyed-in-the-wool Democratic, they were much more socially conservative then.
Right. Well, the Democratic Party was different. My family were what are called yellow dog Democrats, which my dad to this day, probably a very socially conservative guy, but he won't. I think if his hand would atrophy, it would wither up if he tried to vote for a Republican. I mean, it just really would.
Yeah.
I mean,
no, it's a different beast down there for sure.
Yeah.
And so they brought me into this world, and the fact that I was an only child, furthered the nurturing of my weird pursuits of loneliness.
And that wasn't common. That wasn't common in earlier ages.
It was very unusual.
Yeah.
It was very unusual within. My dad had a brother and sister. My mom had 5 sisters and a brother, Catholic, right?
Right.
And so, and there I was, this weird viola-playing beast with long hair and a he carried an attaché case full of comic books with him, and I was beyond loved by my respective, extended families, but understood. I don't think they understand me to this day. Because here's we gave up our children to the wider world, and they produced this weird E.T. You know what I mean? And of course that it is, and then I also developed asthma, which to some degree it's genetic, to some degree it's
environmental.
We now know that it's environmental. And my mom was a smoker all her life, so I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know how that came about. Maybe it was just the fulfillment of my nerd destiny. Like my self-actualization as a nerd required me to develop a debilitating lung condition such that I could not play or run or jump a thing. Do you know what I mean?
It's like people like the shaman would be born with a certain birthmark or something. It's just a sign that you'd been chosen.
Right, and then of course they got jobs that allowed them to buy this house, which then allowed them a much more comfortable lifestyle than their parents and family had previously enjoyed, although everyone's doing great now. But so in a sense, if I were born in another time, if I had been born a generation earlier, I might have had the same natural inclination to the lonely pursuits of solitary self-perfection, but it would have been beat out of me.
Right.
I think to some degree, I probably would have had siblings, and I wouldn't have therefore had the same amount of nurturing attention paid to me. I would have had to fight for attention. I would have had to learn to deal with confrontation in some way, which I still have a problem with because I didn't have any siblings. I would have probably been required to work much more. There would have been pressure on me to put my attention and time and scholarship towards a practical profession as opposed to literary theory, which is what I studied. Like, not just literature, literary theory, because literature itself was too practical.
Yeah, right,
Theory, yes. Do you know what I mean? And if I'd been born 100 years earlier and had developed asthma, I would have been sickly in bed, like Teddy Roosevelt, or maybe I would have become president. I don't know. But I think we do live in an age, or I would say that what was ending in the 70s in Brookline, Massachusetts, was the middle class. Mm-hmm. And that what was already affluent in Brookline became, through the 80s and through the economic boom of the 80s, exclusively affluent. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
There was no more room for mixing the wealthy with the moderately wealthy, with the upper middle class, with the middle class, to even the lower middle class. Mm-hmm. All of that was in Brookline when I was growing up. That is no more. That is gone. And that is gone from so many different parts of our society. Mm-hmm. And it's a shame, I think, because, for all the reasons that it's a shame, but it was a high time. What do I want to say about this? I don't know if I can pull it all together like an oscillating fan. Like you were doing with that oscillating fan talk earlier.
That's okay. You maybe haven't sat down and processed some of this stuff.
There's an element where you can't go home again, and I don't know that I would raise my own kids in Brookline anymore, because it feels to me, I may be wrong, but it feels to me demographically so much more affluent. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I think I think when you ask the question, would we have survived physically 100 years ago or 50 years ago, given our physical infirmities and our personal weirdities? I don't know, but you are a product of where you come from.
Yes, that's what this whole podcast is about.
Yeah.
You summed up not only your story but the whole podcast. I can quit now. This is the final episode. That's what happens
when two master broadcasters talk to each other via a landline.
Yes. So next week, John and I will be starting our new podcast, Master Broadcasters / Stephen King Talk / Asthma Talk.
Right.
Because those three things, they nest like Russian dolls into one another.
Yeah, matrushkas. Is that what they're called?
I don't know. I'm after making that flopped reference to the Boston Public Broadcasting Station. I'm not going to try anymore. I'm not going out any more limbs.
You did a good job, Jason. Hey, everybody, make sure to watch Ragnarok on Netflix. And,
Here. Oh, this is plug time. Now you get to plug anything.
Plugs.
Yeah, plug anything you want.
Watch Ragnarok on Netflix. Please check out johnhodgman.com/tour to see when I might be coming through your town. I've got shows coming up this fall in Pittsburgh, in Iowa City, in Minneapolis, in Madison, Wisconsin, in Austin, Texas, and in Boston. And this all new post Ragnarok comedy in which I discuss what it is like to still be alive since Ragnarok did not happen. And I'll be hanging around and talking to you as well, and maybe someday I'll come down to Huntsville.
Oh, Alabama. I would love that. And if I could do anything to facilitate physical manifestation of John Hodgman here, I would love to. Just let me know. And
well, you know what? Call up. Well, how far is Huntsville from Birmingham?
It's about 40 or 50 miles.
Did you come and see us, Al Madrigal and me, when we were in Birmingham?
I didn't know you were going to be there. So
I feel really bad about that.
Well, no, it's fine. I mean, I didn't know until I saw you tweet that you were at Bottle Tree or something. I was like, wait a minute.
That's what I was going to say. Will you do me a favor? Bottle Tree has been after me to come do some comedy, and we made a quick connection, but it kind of fell off the map, or fell off our lists or whatever. Drop them a line and remind them that I want to come perform there.
Well, I think I know people.
I'll come do that this fall, no problem. And then we can, or maybe you and I can just have a conversation on stage.
Yeah, that would be thrilling for everyone.
I think it would be.
But we could.
It would be easier for me. How about that?
Right. Yeah. It would. You should be sitting. First of all, you'd be.
I don't really care about what's thrilling for others. I'm worried about what's easy for me.
Look, after they buy the tickets, that's all you got to do.
Yeah, there you go.
You just got to sell the tickets, and then that's the point. That's the purpose of the exercise.
Right.
Well, John Hodgman, do you have anything else?
Yeah, I got to go pick up my daughter from sailing now. What weird creature am I creating?
One of my children will do a podcast in the future and interview your children. She's
going to come back wearing a Kelly Green Izod with a martini in her hand.
Well, now is the time of the podcast where I say I'm going to stop recording, and then I stop recording.
Goodbye until next time.
All right, goodbye.